Underwater and Underground Bases by Richard Sauder, PhD. So this is yet another book by the underground base examining Dr. Sauder. This particular volume is a great follow-up to his first book, Underground Bases and Tunnels: What is the Government Trying to Hide? In this, he digs a lot even deeper, and this has a lot of good, again, a lot of patent information, a lot of other, a lot of information about the state of the art of tunneling technology, mining technology, high-speed rail technology, and how all of that fits together in covert military projects. Probably the most fascinating thing in this is his documenting of the plans that the United States Navy had for developing bases on the ocean floor for submarines. So as far-fetched as that might be, the U.S. Navy was actually proposing this idea and was in very serious planning stages of this back in the late 60s. And Dr. Sauder actually turns up a fair amount of paperwork showing a pretty good document trail showing that this was being very seriously considered as a very important part of submarine warfare, was to have places where submarines could actually dock. And in some cases, he shows plans where they had proposed plans and bases where submarines could actually go inside in what they called a rock site concept. And if you Google that, rock site concept, U.S. Navy rock site concept, you'll see some of those illustrations. And this book, I believe, came out in late 90s, either 99 or 2000 or so. 2001, so there you go. So 2001 is when this came out, right after a couple of years after Kundalini Tales. But this has some great information, great follow-up information to his first book about underground bases, and but again, most importantly, about underwater bases. And I know a few folks in with a background in submarine warfare, and I haven't been able to find out if there was anything to that, if any of these plans actually made it into the practical stage. If so, I'm sure that is classified at the highest levels. So I seriously doubt that low-level guys are going to know anything about that. But that's a good fertile ground for investigation. And I always like to ask around when I meet people with experience in the U.S. Navy or Air Force or Army, just if they are familiar with any of these sites, if they've ever been to any of these sites. And you would be amazed. I've had people tell me about sites where there are underground hangars for helicopters and all, but where everybody clams up is when you start asking specifics, when you start saying, well, where is this place? Which site is this? And that's where things get very muddy. And most of these guys have very, very strict agreements they've signed that they cannot reveal details like that. But at any rate, Underwater and Underground Bases by Richard Sauder, PhD. Good information, especially those of you who, if you might have stumbled onto his first book, this is a great follow-up. And one of the things I really appreciate about Richard Sauder's work is he does a great job of not engaging in just wholesale speculation. Very, very little speculation. In fact, you even wish that he would a few times, of saying, what do you think is going on? But he doesn't get into that. He mainly just sticks to the facts of, here's what I've uncovered. If this is going on, if this made it over into the practical stage where they actually built this facility, I don't know, but here's the paper trail leading up to that point. And as any of you know that might have investigated black budget projects, you'll find that a lot of times you can find a lot of information in the planning stage and the financial stage of budgeting and finance for this and planning. But as soon as something goes active, as soon as something actually is implemented, a program is actually followed through with, shall we say, it goes black. And at that point, good luck finding any kind of corroborating information, anything that would prove it. A great example of that is I spent some time at Fort Hood, and it wasn't until I actually met a few people that told me about some of the facilities at Fort Hood firsthand, and people that I trust, that I realized how extensive some of the underground network is underneath Fort Hood. And that's a place I went to on a regular basis when I was in the Army National Guard. So there's a lot more underground stuff than you might think. And one of an acquaintance of mine who was in the Air Force back in the height of the Cold War told me this particular anecdote, which I find interesting. When I asked him about this, he, again, wouldn't give specifics, but he did say that most military facilities, especially SAC facilities, had what were called bolt holes that allowed for, he said most of these places had places for almost everyone on base to hide out underground in the event of an attack, but also bolt holes that allowed them to escape outside the post through a tunnel to another area. If things got crazy in the Cold War, if the base got bombed or if it got overrun by the Russians, then you could have everybody go underground and literally drive a convoy out through this tunnel to a totally different area. So again, make of that what you will. That's purely hearsay on my part, but it's amazing when you ask people about facilities like this, especially if you strip out the alien and abduction kind of phenomenon. If you strip all that out and you just ask about facilities underground and some of the more exotic facilities that might exist, you'd be surprised how many people will tell you about things very similar to what Dr. Sauder is describing in this book. So again, great book because the speculation is very light, facts very heavy, a lot of good stuff, and a good jumping off point into personal investigation. And this is another one of those books I like to keep handy when I'm traveling, especially in the Southwest where a lot of this stuff is hanging out. So anyway, underwater, undersea bases. And if for some reason you stumble onto this video and you know something about a facility like this, I'd love to hear about it because as of my travels this far in my life, I have yet to hear of any strong evidence in favor of these actually being built, but who knows? So there you go. Underwater and Underground Bases by Dr. Richard Sauder.